Ada yang belum bisa. Yang sembilan. Apa sembilan? Yang belum bisa. Belum bisa. Belum bisa. Belum bisa.
Ini berarti start dulu next ininya ya?
Yes, start dulu. Setting semuanya record dulu.
Rich mana Rich? Mama mau belinya kalau tahu.
Oh, saya bawa tahu.
Ini sudah baca tuh Pak 3 kali kan Sering live dulu nggak apa-apa walaupun belum live. Saya coba.
Ini. Enggak, maksudnya kan bisa pencet nomor kan
Nggak ada yang bisa. Dia bilang nggak ada.
Wow, Bu Miki udah masuk. Si aku stop recording atau pause aja deh, admit aja. Aku tak ingetin yang lain deh. Dosennya Aul. Terus namanya? Vira masuk. Iya. Bu Mika udah masuk.
Halo, aku udah masuk. Cuma satu, Bu. Ribut kok di luar. Iya. Dia terus di sini aja, Jun.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Balkis Fauzia, and I'm a final year student from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'm honored to be here today. Even though not in person, I'm glad to still be able to talk to you about the challenges that we've come to face in the 21st century and the solutions.
Halo Safira. Kita nunggu partisipannya sampai jam berapa ya?
Halo Bu Meike, maaf, ya nanti kita tunggu sampai sudah hampir jam setengah 2. Karena acaranya mulai setengah 2.
Oh oke. Terus waktunya 15 menit aja nggak apa-apa ya? Untuk setiap presenter?
Karena presenternya ada 5 kan ya?
Iya, iya.
Ini saya, maaf tadi lagi nyoba punya yang
ganti
judul itu.
Ya, terima kasih.
Terima kasih kembali.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Balkis Fauzia, and I'm a final year student from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'm honored to be here today. Even though not in person, I'm glad to still be able to talk to you about the challenges that we've come to face in the 21st century. The title of my paper reads, Child Exploitation, Taking the Opportunity to be More Active on These Online Platforms. These users are also known as social media influencers. Now, one of the most Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Balkis Fauzia, and I'm a final year student from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'm honored to be here today. Even though not in person, I'm glad to still be able to talk to you about the challenges that we've come to face in the 21st century and the solutions that we can come up with along with it. This pandemic is a very great example of such a challenge, and I bet it has become a driving force for some of the presentation in today's event. My paper, and what I would like to talk to you about today, however, is more related to today's use of social media and the repercussions they have on children. The title of my paper reads, Child Exploitation in the 21st Century, Addressing the Lack of Protection for the Child's Right to Privacy Through Personal Documentation on Social Media. Now let us first explore the background of why this particular issue has come to my attention. With the rise and use of social media and the possibility of monetizing or profiting from such use,
Halo Mbak Dia, selamat bergabung. Ada
Halo,
Mas Fawaz.
halo Mbak. Maaf telat. Soalnya aku nggak dapet linknya. Jadi link
Oh,
yang baru aja aku email panitia, baru dapat linknya sekarang baru dikirim. Jadi dari tadi cari-cari link yang dulu dikirim di schedule itu tuh nggak bisa, invalid. Jadi dari tadi tuh sibuk ngontak panitia.
tapi untung udah masuk ya Mbak ya.
Iya.
Gimana kabarnya semuanya?
Baik. Gimana Mbak? Kabar? Ini moderator ya, Mbak Mega?
Ya, saya moderatornya.
Iya.
Ada,
Ini,
ya Mbak.
mudah-mudahan nggak ngantuk Mbak. Ini jam tidur. Di sini 2:30.
Di sana 2:30 subuh.
Belum tidur.
Belum tidur.
Mudah-mudahan nggak ketiduran ya Mbak.
Iya. Ini ada yang bergabung, ada Mas Fawaz, Mas Andi Firmansyah, ada Mbak Gisela juga, Mbak Rona, Ibu Dewi Haryani, siapa lagi? Mbak Liviatin, ini ada Tri Kurnia, apa lagi ya? Ini semua udah mulai masuk nih partisipannya untuk isu ini ya. Ini lebih banyak ke hukum ya, kayaknya kalau aku lihat judul-judul papernya. Hukum sama ya tentang human rights ya. Jadi menarik sih ini. Mungkin nanti aku menawarkan apakah kita kalau misalnya ada yang di dalam forum ini yang orang asing, kita pakai bahasa Inggris. Tapi kalau misalnya dalam forum ini semuanya orang Indonesia, saya menawarkan inginnya mau pakai bahasa Inggris atau mau bahasa Indonesia, terserah. Yang mana yang nyaman. Apakah semua presenternya sudah ada ya di sini? Kayaknya.
Saya Dewi.
Halo Bu Dewi. Bu
Halo,
Dewi
Bu
dari
Dewi.
mana?
Saya dari Pusat Studi Kependudukan dan Kebijakan, UGM.
Oh, temannya Bu Partini ya dulu.
Ya,
Ah,
teman ini.
saya asistennya Bu Partini dulu, Bu.
Oh gitu.
SKK di SSAT dulu sama Bu Partini.
Oh gitu.
Oke. Kalau mungkin sudah ini kita bisa mulai ya biar waktunya tidak makan lama. Mungkin karena sudah sekitar berapa orang ini ya? Ada sekitar 13 orang di session ini. Mungkin kita bisa mulai.
Mbak, aku mau nanya Mbak.
Iya Mbak.
Ini partisipannya ini harus register dulu ya kalau mau ikutan ya?
Iya.
Oh gitu, oke.
Tapi kalau ini nggak apa-apa di-share aja. Untuk sesi ini bisa.
Oh bisa. Oke.
Oke. Oke, baiklah saya mulai aja ya. Saya akan buka. Good day everyone.
Good day.
Good day.
Good day. Okay. I hope you all in a good condition and happy and healthy during this pandemic. We will still struggle until now, yeah. And welcome to the Symposium on Social Science 2020, organized by Center for Southeast Asian Social Studies, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Our theme for this year is Rethinking the Social World in the 21st Century, which want to talk about our social conditions that cannot separate from technology, make us questioning about our future humanity, especially with pandemic situation nowadays. Before we started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Meike Lucia Carolus. You can call me Meike. I am a lecturer in the Department of Communication, UPN Veteran Yogyakarta, and will be your moderator in our panel discussion, especially in this session about women and human rights issues. I would like to congratulate all the presenters who have their papers been selected to be presented today. They are Balkis Nasmi Fauzia. Balkis here? No. Rona Utami, Rizky Ananda Sigit, Hastanti Widinugroho, and Faiz Abdullah Wafi as the second speakers. And the third speaker is Dia Irawati. Hello, Badia. in USA, from USA. And there are also Mas Fawaz Syafiq Rizkula and Andi Firmansyah from Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. And the last one is Miss Dewi Hasusila Stuti. Okay, also I welcome all participants who join with us in this session, and hopefully we can share fruitful knowledge and discussion on what's new about women's issue and its relation to the human rights. In addition, I will inform you about guidelines so that we can following this session more orderly. First, the presenter will present their research one by one. In this session, there are 5 papers will be presented. I will be the timekeeper. Each presenter will present their paper around 15 minutes or via video if they cannot join with us. And after that, we will begin our discussion. You can type your question via chat or can directly asking after I give you permission. Before we closing, I will give conclusion and we can take a picture together. Is there any questions? Is that clear? Okay, thank you very much. And we can start now without further delay. I will give opportunity to the first speaker, Balkis Nasmi Fauzia from Department of International Law, the Faculty of Law at Universitas Gadjah Mada. She will present through video about child exploitation in the 21st century, addressing the lack of protection for the child rights of privacy through personal documentation on social media. The host can help us so that we can see the video from Balkis. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Balkis Fauzia, and I'm a final year student from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'm honored to be here today. Even though not in person, I'm glad to still be able to talk to you about the challenges that we've come to face in the 21st century and the solutions that we can come up with along with it. This pandemic is a very great example of such a challenge, and I bet it has become a driving force for some of the presentation in today's event. My paper, and what I would like to talk to you about today, however, is more related to today's use of social media and the repercussions they have on children. The title of my paper reads, Child Exploitation in the 21st Century, Addressing the Lack of Protection for the Child's Right to Privacy Through Personal Documentation on Social Media. Now, let us first explore the background of why this particular issue has come to my attention. With the rise in use of social media and the possibility of monetizing or profiting from such use, a lot of people have taken the opportunity to be more active on these online platforms. These users are also known as social media influencers. Now, one of the most popular social media platforms that can effectively make and stabilize income is YouTube. Monetizing content on this platform has been such a popular trend, so much so that it has become full-time jobs for some people, where they can afford to support not only themselves, but their families by making videos and uploading them on YouTube. I'm sure that this is not a strange concept for those very active on social media, but I will give you a brief overview of YouTube's monetization system. Through the YouTuber Partner Program, creators can start making money through advertising, memberships, or partnerships with sponsors. Now, in order to achieve these three things, there needs to be a certain amount of views that the channel gets. Overall, these three ways have one thing in common. The more views the channel gets, the more money the creator makes. How do these channels get more views? By gaining followers or subscribers to their channels. To do this, their channel needs to grow and continuously engage with the audience. Videos need to be interesting, consistent, and feed into the wants of those viewers. Now, the focus of the paper lies in the challenge of having family vlogging channels on YouTube. Family vlogging channels in this context constitute as channels that may be run by one or both of the spouses in the family, and content centers on the dynamics of raising children in their everyday life. Where these channels have more than 1 million subscribers, more often than not would YouTube be these parents' full-time jobs. Now, where families start heavily relying on family-related content to make money, their children would automatically be at the forefront of these channels as well. At this point, it is no debate that the aim of these videos is monetary gain. And so as a result, the online personalities that engage with the viewers and make money could be seen as having economic value. This includes both parents and children. However, in this context, it is the children that would have no control over these videos being made, edited, and uploaded, as they are children, and these decisions would generally be made entirely by the parents. Now, this is the core of the paper, just pointing out the dangers of having a child's life be documented, posted on social media without the proper and specific legal protection. Because documentation at an early age would shape a child's digital footprint, these are a few dangers that would severely damage a child's mental, emotional, and physical well-being. First is susceptibility to being targeted on social media, which could lead to physical or emotional danger. Second is their susceptibility to bullying in school because of the oversharing that these videos would result in. Third is susceptibility to rejection from job offers. This is because digital footprints would usually remain on the internet for a long time and would usually follow a child into adulthood. The fourth is susceptibility to growing up without understanding the concept of boundaries due to oversharing. There are, of course, a few major writings that I have read and find to be very substantially helpful for my paper. However, there is a gap or what seems to be lacking in all these writings is when it comes to identifying the patterns of a parent's conduct and whether that would constitute as a violation of a child's privacy interest in the specific context of personal documentation for monetary gain. For instance, for the first writing, while it gives a comprehensive outlook into the role of parents shaping their children's digital identity, the article does not give insight to current cases where they focus on child's privacy interests in the context of video documentation. The second article, while this article underlies the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child's definition of best interests of a child throughout or across different countries through the different measures they take, there is still no specific in-depth analysis on Article 16 of this convention, which elaborates on the child's rights to privacy and what it means to have privacy. And the third, while it discusses the dangerous implications of online presence shaped for children on social media and actually proposed ideas on how to regulate child-centric content, this article has limited the scope of subject to child performers employed by parents and is very US law-centric. By identifying these gaps, I'm able to analyze each component that I think are essential to improving the child's legal protection. I have used primary sources such as newspaper reports, which covered stories of these family vloggers to highlight concrete cases that can approve or disapprove the points of contention. I have also used secondary sources, which was used to sufficiently analyze the general application of the UNCRC or the Convention of the Rights of Child in this context across different legal systems. With this, I've been able to divide my paper and condense it into under 3 issues. First is what constitutes as a violation of the child's rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Second, the repercussions that have escalated to cases of child abuse. And third, recommendations on how to tackle the gaps in child's legal protection across different legal systems. I will now break down these issues and elaborate on what my research covers. For the first issue, this includes identifying the differences between mere documentation of a child's life and the extenuating circumstances where it would lead to the invasion of their privacy. There is a thin line of difference between documentation of children in a way that would still allow them to lead a private life and that it would not violate any of their privacy interests, and documenting their lives in a way that would serve as interference or intrusion to anything related to, for instance, their personal relationships, private space, or personal correspondence. Because there is a lack of current concrete cases to show what it means to have a child's privacy rights violated under the convention, I provided examples of family channels in the paper where their content focuses on the personal details of their children, which under Article 16 of the UNCRC would constitute as a violation of a child's privacy rights. Now the second issue. There are 2 parts for this issue. I first try to assert that a violation of a child's privacy rights in this context could lead to a violation of Article 32 of the UNCRC, which is the right to protection against economic exploitation. And second is assessment that this violation could also escalate to lead to child maltreatment and abuse in the household. Now for the first part, the current framework of the UNCRC for Article 32 was meant to address child labor, but I concur with studies that have pushed to extend this provision to also apply to activities which targets children as part of exploitative advertising and content. Since the definition of economic exploitation is only invoked when there is a harmful impact towards the children, I attempted to prove in the concrete cases in the paper that the documentation of their private lives have indeed caused a direct harmful impact to their social development and well-being in school. For the second part, I also entertained the claim of these violations escalating to child maltreatment and abuse in the household, but made it clear that it is inconclusive if these videos on social media were the cause of the maltreatment or abuse, or if they're actually only revealing the misconducts of parents instead. Now, the third issue focuses on recommendations and steps that can be suggested to improve the legal protection. For this issue, I've identified and discussed the current laws and regulations under which the UNCRC is incorporated under in domestic laws. And it seems that there is a trend that in these domestic laws, there is a strong tradition of parental rights to control and shape the lives of their children. A lot of the control lies on parents making decisions for their children, and understandably so, since the parents do have the rights as legal guardians of their children. But then it becomes problematic when it is the parents that would be the ones to violate these rights in the upbringing of their children, especially in the context of social media, where they decide what is uploaded and what is edited, and how frequently these videos go up. I made recommendations in the paper, such as a more broad or a more comprehensive legal overview of the monetization system on social media platforms, and how it should also be reformed in conjunction with the domestic laws regarding legal protection of children in a country. Internationally, there should also be the extension of Article 32 of the UNCRC regarding the definition of economic exploitation, so it is able to apply to novel cases such as these. I hope that this has provided you with the insight to be aware of new challenges that comes with imposing legal protection for children everywhere. Social media and technology in general have created many opportunities, but there are also challenges to overcoming abuse, missteps, or misuse of such opportunities. That is it for my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Okay, thank you very much, Balkis. It is unfortunate that Balkis cannot join with us, but from her video, we can learn so much about how YouTube's monetization system challenge family and its concern about child life in pursuit income without proper and specific legal protection. And based on her findings, there are violation of child's privacy, especially in the misconduct of parents and child abuse. So we can elaborate this issue more after all of the speaker present their papers, and you can ask Balkis, and we can send the question to her so she can improve her research. So next, the second presenter is the team from Faculty of Philosophy, Universitas Gadjah Mada. There are Rona Utami, Rizky Ananda Sigit Nugraha, Astanti Widi Nugroho, Faiz Abdullah Wafi, and Sri Yulita Panani. Are they here? Okay, so I will give opportunity. Yeah, okay, I will give you 15 minutes to present your research. So the time is yours. The paper entitled Transgender Rights as Human Rights, the Ethics of Harmony Inside. Please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mbak Meike. I will try to share the PowerPoint. So I hope you guys can see this slides. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the chance for us as the team from the Faculty of Philosophy UGM to present this actually this unfinished work. So there are still many things to do for this research, but I'll try to give some explanations on this work. So the title is about transgender rights as human rights from the ethics of harmony inside. So I'm Rona, and I think my team are not here. So yeah, as the topics, the big topics of today's symposiums, I will give the underlines on what I'm working on today. So it is about women and human rights, but I'll try to see another gender that have to be also respected from us. Actually, as we all know that the issues of transgender, homosexual, and lesbian, it becomes very much popular in our country, but there are still inequality faced by those communities, especially in human rights issues. So the questions of this work is, how does this ethics of harmony contribute to answering the equality and fundamental rights of transgender in Indonesia? Actually, this is not only one question, but I just would like to make it stress on how the ethics of harmony can contribute to find and to explain another ethical frameworks besides another ethical normative branch. So there are three the methods that we use in this research is literature study, of course, and also field studies and in-depth interviews. This one is the pictures when we conducted a research in the transgender Islamic boarding school, and we used to, well, we supposed to have some more in-depth interviews, but due to this pandemic, so that we cannot visit them directly there. But this interview actually conducted before the pandemic rise. So there is, as we already know, that there is a transgender Islamic boarding school in Yogyakarta, and besides that, there is also another organization called the Kebaya. It's an organization that that is for the transgender community, because they are not really fulfilled with their basic rights. So we found several problems that arise in these issues. So for example, why they create this transgender Islamic boarding school, because they cannot conduct worship peacefully to the God. So when they are going to the mosque and they stand with the women, so the jama'ah of the women avoid them. And when they are standing in the men line, also it the same. The men avoid them, so that they the rights or the freedom of religion to worship to the God is really disturbed. So they create this Islamic boarding school to worship to the God. And also another things that really disappointing for them is the fundamentalist groups, the Islamic fundamentalists against their community, and it makes them move to another places to again rebuild this boarding school. Their existence have excluded from their surroundings, which in fact it makes some difficulties for them to access several chances. For example, health insurance, the government ads, and the chance to get some jobs. So even in their communities, the LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisex, and transgender, these communities, this transgender community got being discriminated by other community, being discriminated by the lesbian, the gay, and bisex, because they are really difficult. They face some difficulties to get some jobs because their appearance is you can directly recognize that they are transgender, but you cannot directly recognize that they are lesbian or homosexual. So these conditions really makes them difficult to find some jobs because they are being excluded from the communities. And there are other several problems that faced by them, but because we know that in Indonesia there is no special rules that that makes for them, for example, the law which makes especially to respect their rights, or vice versa. There is no rules or laws in Indonesia that also against them. So they are actually face some dilemmas whether they are accepted or not. But when I asked them why, when I asked them whether their communities or their movements is not against the first principle of Pancasila, for example, as people said that you are not you supposed not to be here in Indonesia because you are against the first sila of Pancasila. But again that we cannot see these problems through only the first principle, because we have also the second principle, which really support the human rights issues. So why is it happen? Because the stigma of the society considered that transgender women is a punishment from the God. Also, the ignorance of Indonesian society about the definitions of gender that contingent to individual subjectivity. So sometimes we cannot see them as a transgender because they are transgender, but we have in mind another thinking that they are not good. This transgender is a bad behavior or etc. So we cannot see that there are several genders that actually recognized in this world. Not only, but sometimes we see only gender divided by two, female and male, but we cannot see that there are many other several things. For example, in Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, there are 5 genders recognized in that country. But I'm not talking about those divisions. So the problems arise in these issues is that the universal law, which is sourced from the ontology and utilitarianism approach, seems inadequate to prescribing moral actions and making each individuals comply with this law. So I mean, what is inside this is the ontology and utilitarianism is another ethical normative branch that we will see later. I will show you. And the second is the countries, our countries are unable to provide the sense of security for every citizen, regardless their sexual orientations. Whether this, we have to respect the basic rights of human rights. For example, the feeling of security, freedom of belief on religion, and etc. Another basic rights. So what is ethics? I'll try to overcome or no to explain these issues with providing another framework with through the ethics. So as we already know that ethics is concerned with the studying or building up the coherent set of rules or principles by which people ought to live. So there are three big moral theories. They are another branch of this ethics, but I will show you there are three. So deontology, consequentialism, and also virtue ethics, where this ethics of harmony is really related to this virtue ethics. So the ontology focus on moral rules or reason. If you know Immanuel Kant, this moral theory is really related to what Immanuel Kant think. So it actually resembled to the golden rule: never lie, never steal, and never kill, and etc. And the consequentialism is really related to utilitarianism or John Stuart Mill theory. So the point is the greatest happiness principles. So actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness as much as they can. But on the virtue ethics, it is focused on the character. So it attempts to instill certain qualities of the person, like be honest, be just, be worthy, be nice, and
Halo Mbak Rona. Enggak. Ini jaringannya agak ini ya, terpotong ya. Halo Mbak Rona. Waktu Mbak Rona itu tinggal 2 menit, mungkin timnya Mbak Rona bisa melanjutkan.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, it's just I don't know where. So yeah,
it's
berapa menit lagi tadi?
2 minutes more.
2 minutes. Okay. I directly go to maybe the conclusions on this work. So in this ethics of harmony, there are 2 values. So the results of this ethics of harmony, the attitude of respecting others that related to upholding tolerance of human relations and maintaining harmony related to respect for individual rights, has actually a strong potential to support the human development, and that the potential of the ethics of harmony as a moral framework encourage the human development originates from one of the values of respect. So if you have this notions of respect, you have to respect another one, and the situations make the harmonious life. That's what's actually the simple things what the insight of the ethics of harmony. So as we already know that all humans are equally same because we are coming from one God, and it also underlines that every individual to be more sympathetic and feel related to other people, so that their existence, the existence of the transgenders as human being could be respected in the society. So so the conclusions is actually, I already mentioned it earlier, that the values of respect and harmony actually prominent to provide an alternative framework in explaining human rights existence, especially the transgender existence, that we have to respect and we have to know that they are another persons in our surroundings. So yeah, I think that's all from these presentations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mbak Rona and the team. And it's really interesting research because we know that what happened for our transgender friend, they get repression both from fundamental groups and also from government. And the issue that you bring out for this session, that the ethics, you know, like you found that there are 2 aspects that we can discuss furthermore, that like harmony and respect. And the idea of harmony, it's like you have to sacrifice your happiness so that you can creating peace. But on the other hand, you need respect also, so that we can live peacefully. But respect cannot be built without you recognize their existence. So I guess it's really quite challenging for our society and the future of humanity, like
exactly.
as try to elaborate in this conference. So thank you so much, Barona, and then we can move to the next presenter. The third speaker is Mbak Diah Irawati from the Department of Anthropology, State University of New York, Binghamton, New York, USA. Hello, Mbak Diah. She will present her research entitled Considering the Role of Money and Gifts in the Construction of Motherhood and Family Among Indonesian Transnational Female Domestic Workers. Are you ready, Mbak Diah? Okay, the time is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mbak Meika?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for SOS 2020 for having me here. And thank you to Mbak Meika as a moderator in facilitating this parallel session today. As Mbak Meika already introduced me, my name is Diah Irawati, or Ira. I'm a PhD candidate at SUNY, or State University of New York, Binghamton, New York. So hopefully I'm not sleepy today's presentation, because this is my sleeping time. Like people in New York, like we are sleeping right now. It is like 2 a.m. in the morning. Good afternoon in Indonesia. So I would like to share screen, my PowerPoint. Yep. All right. So my today's presentation is about considering the role of money and gifts in the construction of motherhood and family among Indonesian transnational female domestic workers. So I would like to give you some background or context. So there are two contexts in this paper or in my presentation. The first one is social political context, and the second one is the academic context. So the social political context is the state's policies of migrant workers and the state's politics of money. So as we know that Indonesia is one of the largest migrant sending countries besides the Philippines, right? And other countries such as Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And beginning in the 1970s of the early development of the Suharto era, under President Suharto, the Indonesian government applied economic development politics, or it's called developmentalism. As we know as well that Suharto claimed himself as a father of development, and he adopted modernism or modernization and developmentalism from the Western since earlier, or the beginning of his rule or development. That targeted women for the involvement in the foreign labor market, which had a demand for cheap labors, especially in 1970s and 1980s, when there is a collapse in terms of the prices of oil and the devaluation of rupiah in Indonesia, particularly in 1986. So ever since, one major policy of the Indonesian government has been to encourage women to work abroad as domestic workers, and has been an apparent economic strategy to promote sending female migrant domestic workers, not only to reduce poverty, but also to press down the unemployment rate, and as a temporary national solution of the economic crisis and the economic predicament at that time. As Saskia Sassen mentioned in her analysis, that women become a panacea, like a solution for all of the problems that the government or the state had, especially for the economic crisis. And there is a feminization of survival in which the government and the society relied on women as cheap labor and export them, quote unquote, exported them to other countries. So especially in Gulf countries, like Middle Eastern countries and East Asian countries. So the government began exporting labor as part of national labor policy, such as in the 5-year development plan or REPLITA, and the long-term development plan. It's called RPKP. And some of the statement from the Minister of Manpower in Abdul Latif and also Yaakob Nuaweya, 2001 and 2004, it is clearly stated that they said the government of Indonesia would like to continue to export. So they used the word or terminology, export women's labor as domestic workers in other countries, to stabilize the economic development and to encourage them to participate in the public or in the development process. The state politics of money, so there is a universalization of money, not only in Indonesia, not only from the government of Indonesia, but also all over the world, even in the US, that money is only seen or considered as something that has correlated with market and with cash, and its function as impersonal. But for domestic workers, while I work with domestic workers for quite long, since I was a women's activist in Indonesia, and I did some research for my master's degree and for my PhD as well. So I communicated with them, and they said that there are a lot of meanings of money and gifts that they send to their families or their children left behind. It's not only about money as a impersonal and connected to the market, but also there is a personal meaning behind the money and the gift that they send. In the national context also, the government hailed and labeled domestic workers or migrant workers in Indonesia as national heroes of remittance. So the government calls them national heroes of remittances to emphasize their key role in economic development in Indonesia, with registered remittances accounting for more than 6 billion annually. And in 2016, it reached like $8.9 million US. So the government received economic benefits via intermediary agents or brokers, and even government institutions for making arrangements and distributing labor by establishing the Indonesian Manpower Supply Association, or IMSA, a labor recruitment agency licensed by the Manpower Ministry. So the government does not take into account the personal lives and family relations of Indonesian migrant workers. So those policies ignore key roles migrants' money and gifts play in personal and family lives. So there are a lot of meanings of money and gifts that the domestic workers send to their family, and as we know that they are basically or generally head of the household, so the family rely or depend on them. So this research or this paper addresses social, cultural, political, and personal impacts of remittances, money and goods, and also gifts on migrant mothers they send to their children and their families. So remittances are an immense global phenomenon interweaving personal and family concern, and it relates to not only global but also personal and family matters. And next is the state's politics of gender and family. So there is a gender politics and the politics of family adopted by the state, especially during the New Order, and I believe until now. So while on the one hand, it's strongly, the government campaigns for the traditional family and gender roles through the political project of the state maternalism. So in social science, specifically in sociology and anthropology, it's called state maternalism, or in Julia Suryakusuma's concept, it's called state ibuism. So which is the combination between the Javanization or Javanese bourgeoisie and priaization and housewifeization. This is the concept coming from Mariah Miss, the housewifeization or domestication of women. So as we can see that the New Order administration applied gender politics and the politics of the family to consolidate its power. We know that the format of the government of the New Order, so they adopted the family structure, I mean, to easily control the citizens, and including women. So we can see from the some policies like 1974 marriage law and the 2004 law of domestic violence, 1974 ministerial decree of the Department of Internal Affairs on the 5 precepts Pancadharma Wanita of 5 duties of women and family welfare movement. Next is globalization and migration. We know that they lead to the proliferation of transnational families. So there is a change, there is a shift in terms of the family. It becomes transnational families. So the transnational families or transnational motherhood do not conform or do not fit the traditional norm or the traditional families, or it's called modern family in Indonesia, promoted or campaigned by the state. It's not nuclear family and they do not live together. So Rachel Pereñas, a sociologist, and she studied about migrant domestic workers a lot in her books, mentioned this as postmodern families. As Judith Stacy also talked about in her book about families, she also calls it as transnational family as postmodern family. Transnational migration shapes the meaning and representation of family, home, and household as well. Family structures, value, forms, which have existed in society for centuries. Family and home are no longer a structure where parents and children together live together. Instead, they are still connected, even though they are separated geographically and physically. So next is the academic one. The study focus, and also my second context is the academic approach. Studies in anthropology and other social sciences examining the role of money and scent among transnational migrant workers or domestic workers analyze it by applying 2 major frameworks. Only 2 major frameworks or dominant frameworks that I could see so far. The first one is that sending money and gifts facilitates the commodification or economization of love and monetization of care. So there are a lot of studies about this. So if I have time, I could show you some studies, some scholars who studied about this issue or topic. And the second approach or framework is that money and gifts is an expression of care and it's a sign of emotional attachment and closeness to families. It's a form of expressing love and care and reinforcing relationship. So I call it emotionalization of money. So the first one is economization of love or commodification of love, and the second one is emotionalization of money. The first one, the first framework, believes that some women, migrant workers or migrant mothers, put much effort in commodifying their love and emotion by sending money or material goods to compensate for their absences, like physical absences, to replace emotional intimacy, to substitute the emotional attachment in their present, to compensate their presence with material goods and remittances or other gifts. So while some studies show how the transnational family contributes to shifting the traditional family, transforming family, motherhood, and parenthood, my research or my paper asked how the practice of sending money and gifts contribute to producing new motherhood and parenthood that challenge the traditional family norms. So this is not, it's not following the state's promotion of traditional family, right? In particular, my paper analyzes how being engaged with the international money and the practice of sending transnational money might construct new identity, new social class identities in terms of that they are mothers, that they are citizens, that they are also part of the transnational family members. So it is a side of negotiation with their family members and resistance to the state's image and representation of female migrant domestic workers, that they are only national hero remittances, but they are still considered as informal workers. They are still second-class citizens, not only in Indonesia as a host country, but also more in the sending countries. So they experience exploitation a lot. So they also experience discrimination, and a lot of violence, even like sexual violence from their employers and from other, even in Indonesia as a host country. So they're still unprotected as a workers, and their work is still considered as unskilled, informal, and natural as a woman. There is a biological determination and essentialism.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is my research problem. As I already mentioned, that I would see different local, socio-cultural, and political contexts and dynamics in studying money and gifts. And there are a lot of meanings in terms of the sending money and gifts practices, experienced by domestic workers. So I consider a particular variation, and I also consider like some cultural differences or background. This is just literature reviews. I say like major frameworks. I just like go quickly. Transformational family and transnational family, the link between identity and politics, anthropological meaning of money, and remittances. This is I already mentioned before, and I also consider agency of women, that women or migrant workers not only passive or permissive, but also they have like capability or capacity to resist the government or the state, and even the narrative by media who blame them as a bad mother. So they try to prove that they're not bad mothers. They're still like good mothers and good citizens. So this is the conclusion, if I could say that this study is important to shed light on the roles of migrants from being simply a tool for surviving economic and social problems to more complex and dynamic strategies of social, cultural, and political experiences. So this is also to see how sending and receiving money and gifts are key in constructing the family and motherhood and reconstructing the concept, practices, and arrangement of the families. So I refer this as a family practices and also doing motherhood and doing families to see the variation in different family or transnational family. And the last one is the study provides a new perspective on how money and gifts are not always construed in a capitalistic way with impersonal market interpretation and terms, but also like other or beyond the capitalistic ones. This project, this research and this paper also offer another perspective on mothers and children. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dia. Well, I guess we agree that the theme about gender and development it's really interesting, especially today, because like there's a transnationalism and globalization and the idea of development always like develop. Like now we facing the new idea about ketahanan keluarga, like you give women role and rights to participate in the public sector, but you still give us the burden to maintain the family. And I guess it's what you did in your research can give a new perspective, especially because you add about identity and how this identity and also class social, like there's a working mothers and then migrant workers, and it's quite interesting because we believe that women can participate in the context of development, but they still have like what it's called like double burden to create heaven at home, which is impossible because now we have economic politics like right now divide us to be more repressed than 20 or 30 years ago when the Repelita was established. I guess your research can give color to read again about development in our country and what our government try to create women and redefine Ibuism, state Ibuism. So I guess thank you so much, Mbak Dia, and I will move on to the fourth speakers. There are Mas M. Fawaz Syafiq Rizkula and Mas Andi Firmansyah from Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. Hello, Mas Fawaz and Mas Andi. They will present their research about assessing the ASEAN human rights mechanism in handling racial discrimination in Southeast Asia. So I guess, are you ready?
Yes,
Okay, time is yours. Thank you.
Could you hear my voice?
It's louder, please.
Now how?
Yeah.
It's better?
Good,
Okay.
Better, better.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mbak Meike, and also the committee of the symposium on social science to 2020. Let me introduce me and my teams. My name is Muhammad Fasyafir Sula, and also my friends Andi Firmansa. We are coming from International Relations Departments of University of Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. And here, we are going to talking about the human rights in ASEAN, especially in the Southeast Asian regions. And the themes of our research is about the assessing the ASEAN human rights mechanisms in handling racial discriminations in Southeast Asia. All right, this is my outline of presentations. The first is about introductions, and the second is overview about the case and also about the regulations and finding the discussions and also the and then for the for the next is literature review, and then theory and the research method that I use in this research, and then the results and discussions, and the last is conclusion. All right, we are going to talking about the introductions about the how the ASEAN, how the country, the members of ASEAN in Southeast Asia region especially, and also about how the conditions of the human right or racial discriminations. As we know, Southeast Asia continents under ASEAN community is one of the diversity regions in the world, consist by a thousand of tribes, variants of religions, different political system, economic conditions, and also the geopolitical for each country of ASEAN. The difference that appeared in ASEAN was established due to the historical background that makes Southeast Asia region very diverse. For the example of the political systems, which is some of the country are colonized by or ally with the country using democracy as the political system, and others are using communism. As we know, during post-war period, Southeast Asia became one of the continents where the two superpowers at the time used for creating new ally. However, it was very impactful toward how the country shapes nowadays. Cannot be denied, the historical background of Southeast Asia bring the condition of ASEAN nowadays become more diverse, unique, complex, and a thousand difference compared with other regions in the world. Because of the diversity of Southeast Asia, as we know, racial discrimination still become one of the things that often happen in the regions of Southeast Asia. Almost in every single country of ASEAN, they have a different kind of a problem, especially in racial discrimination cases. For the example, the policy that produced by Malaysia government to prioritize the Malaysia society as the first level of race in Malaysia, and also in economic sectors. The problem of South Thailand issue due to the ethnic problem and also the difference of religions. In Indonesia, also political identity are still thick and could say as the cultures of Indonesia, which happen in every time during political elections. And the biggest problem last decade, which impactfully toward all of a country in the regions, is because effective in spreading of the refugees issue of Rohingya in Myanmar. All these racial discriminations actions until notice still has not done yet. Sorry, has done yet clearly due to many of the factors the ASEAN facing in mechanism. Racial discriminations action has given abundant negative impact to the regions because of the idea non-interventions among members and then countries of ASEAN. The racial discrimination affected to image of ASEAN in terms of human rights, instability conditions, decrease the number of investment, and many other problems that appear among ASEAN members countries in the regions. By this issue, the role of ASEAN is become unnecessary because ASEAN can become one and only platform in the region which can take any action in avoiding racial discriminations. ASEAN has put a lot of effort to push to decrease the number of racial discrimination cases. Unfortunately, even though ASEAN has already put the effort, but until nowadays, the racial discrimination is still really impactful or decrease the number in the regions. All right. We are going to talking about the literal review. The first, most of the previous paper or only contour on how ASEAN in handling racial discrimination issue in the region within issue of Rohingya in Myanmar. Even though like I already have a lot of research, but most of the research are only talking about the Rohingya cases. But here in this paper, we try to wipe out all of the problems, especially in racial discrimination in Southeast Asia. And then we trying to looking for the fundamental issue or fundamental problem that why ASEAN still dealing with the racial discriminations. And then the theoretical framework which this paper use is using regime theory, where the racial discrimination issue is become the obligation of ASEAN as the highest institution in the region who should be responsibility even there is any regulations that the ASEAN members cannot be intervened toward other members of ASEAN. Theory and research method in this paper, we are using research method that writer used within this research were library research technique and qualitative data approach to explain how and what ASEAN did to handle the racial discriminations in the regions. And the second one is regime theory by Kirchner as a tools of analysis in order to analyze ASEAN regulations in handling the racial discriminations in Southeast Asia, which has implemented by ASEAN. Because we do believe ASEAN have a big role in order to handling this issue. So by using this regime theory, is make it clear the position of ASEAN, especially in handling the racial or human rights issue. Result and discussions. The first is the racial discrimination issues is in Southeast Asia. The research will mention the exact issues. Those are Rohingya case in Myanmar, discrimination in Southern Thailand, discrimination from the public policy regarding multiculturalism in Singapore and Malaysia, and racial discrimination coming from different tribes happened in Indonesia. And there are still a lot of an abundance of issue in racial discrimination issue in ASEAN. And then the next, ASEAN effort in handling racial discrimination in the regions. We cannot deny if ASEAN has already put their effort, like what I already mentioned in the very first beginning. And we have to take a look the Article 2 of ASEAN Human Rights Declarations, which is talking about every person is entitled to the rights and freedoms set forth herein without distinctions of any kind, such as race, gender, sex, language, religions, political or other opinion, national or social origin, economic status, birth, and disability or other status. And in the others, Article 2 talking about Human Rights Declaration. Furthermore, education shall enable all persons to participate effectively in the respective societies, promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial and religious groups, and enhance the activities of ASEAN for the maintenance of peace. As we know, by these two articles, this is the example. If ASEAN actually fundamentally have already mentioned about in order to decrease and also erase the racial discrimination in the regions. But unfortunately, in actions, ASEAN still cannot be fully support in terms of decrease the numbers of racial discriminations. All right, the weakness of ASEAN in handling these racial discriminations. The racial discrimination issue have never been or include as the thematic studies on issues relating to human rights in the work plan of IHR based on two documents of work IHR 5-year work plan and IHR 5-year work plan 2015 and until 2020. And second, most of the issue of racial discrimination in Southeast Asia countries where happens based on the history between the majority and the minority on the debate who's coming first on their line. And then the last ASEAN principle about non-interference domestic issues among state members of ASEAN. So this is the three fundamental things that make why racial discrimination still happen in the regions. Because the first, even though ASEAN already have in the Article 2 and also 31st, it's about racial discrimination, but in fact, in practically, ASEAN still not really that implementing the racial discriminations. And then second, our culture still stick or still become one of the obstacle in order to implementing and also decrease the number of racial discriminations in the regions. And the last, the non-interventions. The non-interventions the ASEAN implemented also become one of the big problem in order to talking about racial discriminations in the regions. Then what should ASEAN do? ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, IIGHR, need to put the racial discrimination issue as one of the thematic studies of human rights in ASEAN, because by implementing or put this into the thematic studies of human rights in ASEAN, it can spreading the knowledge and also insight about how we should be respectfully with the others and also decrease the numbers of the racial discriminations. Conclusion, racial discrimination is one of the crucial issues in the Southeast Asia. It should be reduced as soon as possible under ASEAN's command. And we can believe if ASEAN is one of the institutions that have a big role in order to handling this problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mas Fawaz and Mas Andi, for your presentation. And again, your research is give us insight to talk about this sensitive issue about human rights, especially in ASEAN, because we know that it's not only weak, it's not only it's so weak, but it's helpless, I guess, because like you already analyzed in your paper that the root of this racial discrimination, well, there are long history about majority, minority, and maybe I can add about colonialism, and of course in the context of Myanmar we have military oppression. And maybe in Thailand we have the Thai people and in Karen such ethnicity in the north, and it's very sad to see that they're rarely recognized by the government. Same here with the Papua and also the situation in Aceh. So maybe it's a long journey to finally have this policy so that we can pursue this peace. But I guess the question here, so what we can do to pursue that in a context of to make this ACHR relevant to this issue. Thank you, Mas Fawaz and Mas Andi. So without further hesitation, I will give the opportunity to the last speaker in this session. Is Ibu Dewi Susilastuti, PhD from Pusat Studi Kependudukan dan Kebijakan Universitas Gadjah Mada. Halo Bu Dewi.
Halo Mbak Meike. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, Bu.
I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint if that's okay with you.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Please, Bu Dewi. Bu Dewi will present her paper entitled "Where Are the Voices of Women in the Indonesian Response to COVID-19 Pandemic?" So without further delay, the time is yours, Bu Dewi.
Thank you. So this is the new title of my presentation, The Untold Stories of Women in the Indonesian Responses to COVID-19. As the title the title is self-explanatory. Here, I would like to talk about the marginalization of the experiences of the voices of women in the Indonesian responses to COVID-19. So the purpose of this paper is twofold. Number one, I would like to discuss about the situation analysis of Indonesian women during the COVID-19 era. And secondly, I would like to find out about the drivers of the marginalization of the Indonesian woman in the Indonesian responses to COVID-19. And this is a library research. I'm using government regulations that are related to COVID-19, and I also use statistical data that support the situation that give ideas that give that show the situation analysis of women. So I would like to start my presentation by a quote from Antonio Guterres, who is a General Secretary of the UN. He says, "The pandemic is exposing and exploiting inequalities of all kinds, including gender inequality." So to be able to discuss about the situation analysis of women during the COVID-19 era, it is very important to understand what's going on to the life of women prior to COVID-19. So what happened before COVID-19 is that we can see a lot of structural inequality. And while we are talking about women, we have to bear in mind that women do not constitute a single entity. There are, in the words of Kimberly Crenshaw, there is a theory that's called intersectionality, which basically says that gender is just one of the many various social markers, because woman, the gender identity also intersect with other identities such as age, and then social class, place of residence, and so on and so forth. So here I'm talking because during COVID-19, the violence against women is on the rise, but we can see here that even before COVID-19, violence against women is quite rampant. And I'm citing data from Komnas Perempuan. There are three realms of violence against women: personal sphere, public sphere, and then state realm. And there is normalization of violence. There are research to show that when we are discussing about violence against women, there are two discourses. The first one is discourse of denial, and secondly, discourse of denial, and the second one is discourse of victim blaming. And when we look at the gender distribution of health workforce, we can see that there is feminization of health workforce, but we can see that Indonesian women who work in the health sector constitute of the lower cadre of workers. And then on top of that, we can see that 61.37 women work in the informal sector that is very notorious of its vulnerability. And also at the same time, 23.31% women work as family workers, which are also precarious. And yesterday we hear about some of the speakers talking about normalization of unjust structure. So we see here that when we're talking about unpaid work, female women in Indonesia do a lot more unpaid work, unpaid domestic work. And people say that this is completely okay, this is completely expected. And at the international level, even in the United States, where that is known as the home of the many feminist movement, many feminists, there is a book called The Second Shift by Hochschild, which basically talk about beban ganda. So beban ganda, the second shift, is known all over the world. It's not uniquely Indonesian. Okay. We have a gender ideology, which Mbak Diah mentioned earlier about state ibuism, which is the state construction of womanhood, I guess. And this gender ideology dictates what kind of aspiration that women have, which concomitantly lead women to choose certain field of study. And then later on, they will choose certain type of work. So it is no wonder here that we can see that the female civil servants in 34 ministries is quite small compared to men. And the percentage of female civil servants in excellent positions is also lower compared to that of men. So after understanding what's going on prior to COVID-19, here we can see what happened now that we have to deal with COVID-19. So vulnerability of women in health sector, because the majority of workers in the health sectors are women. But the feminization of the health sector is not accompanied by the representation of women in health leadership. I cannot find any data about the head of Ikatan Dokter Indonesia, nor the data on the deanship of Fakultas Kesehatan all over Indonesia, but I assume that the lack of women representation in health leadership holds true for Indonesia. And also, when we are talking about the economic impact of COVID-19, the majority of sectors that is heavily impacted by COVID-19 are tourism, which means that those who provide accommodation, food, and beverage, who constitute of mostly women, will be without work for temporarily. And we can see here from the data that is published by Badan Pusat Statistik about the social and the economic impact of COVID-19 that 44.67% of male respondents and 38.55% of female respondents say that their income decreases during COVID-19, but their expenditure rises because there is a need to eat well, to be able to boost their immune system. But we also have to remember that there is a cultural expectation for women to become family treasurer, which puts an added burden for women. And also here you can see that there is more time spent for cooking and clothes washing, both for female and male. But of course, because prior to COVID-19, as I stated earlier, women works more in unpaid domestic work, so they do so too. And here you can see that their percentage of routine work increases, and this causes stress for them. And also the economic stress and the uncertainty that is brought by COVID-19 causes marital deterioration. And the deterioration is related to age and income bracket. This is related to the intersectionality that I mentioned previously. And the most common violence against women are psychological and economic violence, and this makes it the fact that a lot of people have to work from home, they have to study from home. This makes it very difficult, even more difficult for them, because they cannot go out of the house. They cannot run away for a little bit from their spouse, including spouses that are abusive. And on top of that, it's not getting an online counseling is not as easy as before COVID-19, because everything is done online now, and not every victims of domestic violence are digitally literate, or sometimes they don't even have telephone or computer. So my second question is why women's issues are marginalized. So the first one is that not a lot of people, lay people, as well as those who are making decision, understand about the change and continuity of gender ideology in Indonesia. But Diah mentioned earlier that during Suharto period, there is something that is called state egoism, which comes from the work of Julia Surya Kusuma. And the Indonesian people always say, yeah, but during post-Suharto era, we also have law on gender mainstreaming. But we sometimes forget that the law of gender mainstreaming is enacted against the backdrop of the entrenchment of state Ibuism. And the notion of state Ibuism is reproduced through gender-biased textbooks. Now, there are research that show that the textbooks for elementary school, middle school, senior high school, they are gender biased. And also there is the mixed messages from so-called dakwahtainment. For example, hati ke hati dengan mamah dadah, that gives mixed messages for women. And it doesn't really matter whether we are talking about a textbook or about dakwahtainment. There is always the issue of kodrat, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how high your education is. If you are a woman, you're not supposed to forget about your kodrat. So then what happened during COVID-19 means that the unjust division of labor, for example, or unjust power relation between men and women are perceived as normal. There's nothing wrong with that for a lot of people because they are exactly in line with the existing gender construction. So state Ibuism is still around. After Suharto, there is this increasing public piety. So Julia Surya Kusuma said that state Ibuism is still relevant, but because the actor is not the constructor of womanhood is not state. Now we have what Julia Surya Kusuma called Islamist state Ibuism. So we have things like, hopefully your family will be mawadah, mawadah warohmah, which basically means that you are expected still to be a good ibu, which means that you cannot go too far. You can have your career, but you cannot forget your family and your children. And then the second one is lack of female representation at the national and local task force for the acceleration of COVID-19 mitigation, even after the name is changed. Yeah, and we have to Kepres nomor 7 tahun 2020, which lists, various institutions, ministry, yes, and local government. And so that means that, we don't have the representation of women because women empowerment and child protection is not on the list. And then at the local level, the head of the local task force is the governors and the mayors, and the majority of them are men. The other issue is the militarization of COVID-19 responses, and this is not uniquely Indonesian. We can see everywhere, and then there is metaphorical militarization in developed country, and even in Indonesia, there is language of war. President Jokowi called COVID-19 as a two-pronged wars against COVID-19 and economic downturn. But also war framing dampens the critical discourse. This is a state of emergency. We don't criticize anybody during crisis. I'm just going to read this. So militarization tends to cultivate masculine thoughts and behaviors at the expense of women's needs and aspiration. So the conclusion is with COVID-19, we see a lot more about the structural inequalities that have been there forever. And then the government responses to COVID-19 are not gender sensitive, making the condition of women is more worse. And then borrowing the language of war, women seem like collateral damage in the war against COVID-19. Thank you, Mbak Maike. That's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Ibu Dewi, for your presentation. And I guess you give us a very comprehensive map of what happened for women during this pandemic, because it's really like the pandemic opened our eyes that the inequality is real. And you mentioned earlier about what the society try to normalize the unjust system, and it's really happening because a mother in a home right now, they become a teacher, they become a wife and a mother, and at the same time provide everything for her family, and then suddenly her husband sees that when she depressed, she got depressed for what the double burden she's having. Her husband said that you're not patient enough, and it's really hurtful because the system create woman to be like a soldier, but then the goddess at the same time. And once again, it's a very impossible job to do. And you mentioned also about cultural expectation, and it's real. It's happening in a while you try to give us the data about what happened about mother who not also always expected to be a good woman in a state abusive context, and also the intersectionality issue. It's really important to see this. And then once again about violation towards women in a sexual context or domestic violence. And we all know in Yogyakarta there are overload cases in KDRT, and it's really like so sad to see that the system it's not create a good environment to the woman and then in the legal justice also. So I guess your research really contribute to see this more deeper and give us big data about what happened now, and I guess Bu Dewi with PSKK can support that, so that there will be a new policy about that especially in Yogyakarta. So thank you, Bu Dewi, and we have 30 minutes left to open Q&A session. I will give opportunity to participants who want to ask directly. Is there anyone? Hello? We have 5 presenters here, and you can help them to improve their research because some of them are have this still ongoing research, yeah, like Mbak Dia in PhD research. So is there anyone? If it's not, we're going to question from Mas Dedi Kristanto in the chat room. Mas Dedi asking about apart from a country that takes and sells all the bodies and identities of Indonesian women as migrant workers, how do big religious organizations in Indonesia play a role in the process of commodifying the roles of mothers in the context of the work of migrant workers? Maybe Mbak Dia can answer the question from Mas Dedi, and also Mbak Yogi. A question from Mbak Yogi about women in the capitalistic are seen as unproductive labor and second group in the society. Also in the legal draft of family resilience, the migrant workers will give an impact for their family. For example, children with migrant workers' mother will be naughty or etc. With regards to all of that, I'm pretty curious, as they send money to their family, do you think this will give them more bargaining position within the family and society, or their position remain vulnerable? And also from Mas Dedi to Mbak Dia about is the process of placing women as a source of money for the state and family in the context of migrant workers, a deliberate design to place the body of women to support the country's economy from its inability to alleviate all poverty problems in Indonesia. Then where exactly is the role of the Ministry of Women at Orba if it's unable to place women in an equal place in the public sphere? That's all for Mbak Dia, and for Bu Dewi, for Mas Dedi. Mbak Dewi, Bu Dewi, for Mas Dedi, is there a construction shift when state ibuism, then the state decide to send women as cheap labor as Indonesian workers? Is identity as mother still attached to the majority of women who work as migrant workers? So there are those all questions for Mbak Dia and Bu Dewi. And Mbak Rona, you want to ask a question to presenter? Yeah, I can give you permission, but before that, I give time to Mbak Dia dan Bu Dewi to answer the questions first.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Meike. Thank you for the persons who gave me some questions. I have a lot of questions. I have 3 questions. Okay, let me try to answer first from Mas Yogi. Yeah, Mas Yogi, thank you for the question. Oh, Mbak Yogi, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Okay. Mbak Yogi, that's a very good question. Thank you so much. Yes, I think religious organizations, really big religious organizations in Indonesia play a big role, an important role, and I would say not commodifying of women, but commodification or commodifying women as migrant workers, yes, but also I think support state ibuism. I think like Ibu Dewi already mentioned a lot and explained a lot about state ibuism during the Suharto era and also until currently. It's not only in Suharto era period, but also in the current presidency or president administration also still promoted state ibuism and still adopted state ibuism strongly. We could see that. I think some organization, I could say Islam. I'm from State Islamic University, Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta for my bachelor degree. And I also studied about Islamic feminism. So yes, there are some big roles in the Islamic organization and some organizations. In the case of migrant workers, even this is becoming a business. So there's like a special like event organizer, you know, like big business. There's like event organizer who organize pengajian, right, to collect migrant workers and then to give ceramah or pengajian or sermon about what Bu Dewi already mentioned, you know, like mawaddah warahmah, about state ibuism. Like this is like big supporter of state ibuism, right? How to be good mothers, how to be good wife, how to be good women. So the transnational families or transnational mothers, as I said earlier in my presentation, do not fit or do not conform the state ibuism, or in anthropology or sociology we call it maternalism, so which is the domestication of women. They do not stay home. They do not nurture their children in person. They do not take care of their family in person in the family. Instead, they live separately from their children, from their family or the big family members in Indonesian village, right? And they become workers. They become parents, not only mothers, but also parents or quote unquote husbands or fathers, because they take control, they take over the role of the earners, money earners. So they earn money, they earn cash, right? Not their husbands in the village. So they could be empowered or independently, economically independent in terms of the money, right? So yeah, there are a lot of pengajian in Islam just to support state ibuism, just to you know, like it's about social expectation, to promote social expectation or gender expectation, gender roles, that women have to take care of their children in person. They have to stay at home. They have to take care of their family and also their husband to be educators. So that's why this transnational family called a postmodern family, because this is not conforming the state traditional family, or it's called modern family. That's for the Mbak Yogi. And also one more thing, this is women is considered as pillar of the nation and society. So that's why there are a lot of stigmatization and label for migrant domestic workers if they work, because they live separately from their children. So they are considered as bad mothers, bad women, because they leave their husband and they leave also their children. And for Pak Dedi, bargaining position, that's also a good question. Thank you, Mas Dedi, for the questions. Yes and no. Yes, in terms of, as I said, also that they have freedom, right? They could go abroad, right, to gain what Pierre Bourdieu mentioned about social capital, cultural capital, economic capital, even linguistic capital, right? So they become economically independent and empowered. So they have their own decision, right, in terms of sending money and gifts to children and their family members back home in Indonesia. But on the other side, right, they're also vulnerable. They also become victim of stigmatization and labeled as bad mothers and bad women because they leave their family behind. So the media, even society and family and the state vilify them and point finger to them as like blaming them for abdicating their roles as mothers, and if their children are, for instance, like quote unquote naughty, or there is like bad children, so they're gonna be blamed as mothers as well. So in terms of the power relations, they do not have a big bargaining position, right, in terms of the politics. But for economic and for freedom, yes. But one more contradiction that I could see is once the money sent by domestic workers to their families, because the one who controls the money is not the children, but their husband, their big family members who take care of their children back home, right? So the money, when I talk during my research for my master's degree, and when I work in Rumpun Gema Perempuan, an organization, women's organization of feminists who that is really concerned and focused on domestic work. So I found that there are a lot of husbands who use or overuse the money sent by their wives to remarry another woman, or to make an affair to another woman, or to leave their wives. So there are a lot of cases that I found that there are the divorce cases in terms of in the context of domestic workers are high, because they could make a decision to divorce their husband, to leave their husband, because their husband, like on one side, maybe make an affair to another woman, or not responsible for them, and cannot make or earn money for their family, and is not responsible for their family. But again, the stigmatization and the label from the society and the family also point fingers to women as a perpetrator, as a like perpetrator or the doer of the destruction of the family, because they divorce their family, right? They divorce their husband. So their husband is not blamed by the society, instead the women who did that. Even though that we know that the bad husband and bad man is the men themselves, not the women. So this is the unfair in the society. Women always be blamed and become a victim. So the third questions from Pak Dedi as well. Yeah, in New Order, women becomes like, sorry, the question is about the ministry, right? The ministry of the women's empowerment. Yeah, and one hand, I think the New Order applied. Okay, I get like distraction from the noise. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, So yeah, the Minister of Women Empowerment became a big supporter of Suharto regime, Suharto state maternalism or state motherism, or in Julia Surya Kusuma's concept is state ibuism. There is a contradictory gender politics and the gender order during the Suharto era. First is developmentalism, to encourage how the government encourage women to partake in the labor market, to be especially domestic workers in the foreign labor market as a cheap labor, right? In the developmentalism. But on the other hand, they also, besides asking women to participate in the development or labor market, they also ask them to they use the nationalist project, like use women's body, women as a target of controlling families for the women to be like good mothers and good citizens and good women. But on the other side, they also have the traditional, state ibuism. They also have the traditional family pattern and values and structure and form that they have to live together, that women have to live together and to be nurturer, to be good mothers and good. So this is like, I see that this is a contradiction. On one hand, they want to get—
Mungkin bisa dipercepat, Mbak.
Sure, a benefit, yeah. So yeah, I would just say that the Minister of the Women's Government is a big supporter of Suharto. I mean, like to campaign the state ibuism. I think that's that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you Mbak Dia, and please Bu Dewi untuk menjawab pertanyaan Mas Dedi. Shifting about state ibuism, yeah.
Yes, actually the question from Mas Dedi is more appropriate when it's directed to Mbak Ira. My question for Dr. Goddess, thank you so much. Is there a construction shift when state ibuism? Then the state decides to send women as cheap labor as Indonesian workers. Is identity as mother still attached to the majority of women who work as migrant workers? I think Mbak Dia already answered this question, that yes, maybe people don't see, maybe other people see them as bad mothers, but they have the agency to construe themselves that, well, I'm still a good mother through the emotionalization of gift, emotionalization of money. I would like to thank Mbak Dia for participating in this conference. The study is fascinating, and also, you know what time is it in the United States? I don't know. So you should go to bed. You should have gone to bed for a long, long time ago. So I'm so happy that, to hear about this study, to hear about a lot of things that are new to me, even though I participated in some studies on children left behind or family left behind. But I would like to add here that I think because the idea of womanhood is constructed, theoretically, it can be reconstructed because the Philippines also sent a lot of women to work abroad. And one time I read an article in New York Times, and the title of the article is "The Good Women Are the Ones Who Leave." So, the people still look at them as mothers, ibu yang bertanggung jawab. So their job as mother is expanded. Not only they are the ones who stay at home, clean the house, cook for the family, but this is the ones who have to go abroad because, like Mbak Dia said, maybe the husband, the man cannot work for whatever reason. So personally, I think, yes, we have state ibuism, but there are still women who migrated abroad. Are they still being constructed as mothers? Maybe according to other people, they are not good mothers, but they work very hard. They exercise their agency to show, no, I'm still a good mother in my opinion. And I would like to just quickly add that a friend of mine did research on international feminization of international migration, in some areas, in some pockets of migration, there is a culture of migration where little girls aspire to go abroad like their mothers, like their aunties. So this is not something that's stigmatized. What I'm trying to say is whether or not female migrants are stigmatized depends on the location, depends on the history of female migration, I guess. And then there's a question from Mbak Yogi. Is it possible to use the state Ibuism as an alternative way or a strategy for women to mobilize resources in order to achieve the women's goal or women's right agenda, or to promote LGBT rights, for example? I think so. When we have the economic crisis in 1999, after the fall of Suharto, you have to remember that the first organization that organized a big demonstration is called Suara Ibu Peduli. You know, a lot of feminists are disappointed. Why Ibu? You know, why not use a different term? I think that's a clever use of Suara Ibu Peduli, because people who support state Ibuism will be more likely to listen to them. You know, here we have the Ibu who are concerned about the rising price of milk for their kids. You know, maybe people will look at them differently if the name is not Suara Ibu Peduli, if they're talking about inflation of other things. But when you use the term Ibu, that strikes the chord with so many people. A lot of people understand that because we are so used to connect women with Ibu. And good mothers are concerned about the price of milk. You know, you're not. So I think even though, like I said, some people are not quite happy about that, because the way they construe the problem is simplified, because obviously we have a lot of issue, but people are more willing to listen when they hear about something familiar. Thank you, Mbak Meike. Thank you, questioners.
Thank you, Bu Dewi, Mbak Dia, and Mbak Yogi, Mas Dedi, for the questions and the answers. So I will go to Mbak Rona, who will ask questions to other presenters. We have still 10 minutes left. Yeah.
Okay.
Mbak Rona.
Yeah. It is not because I don't get any questions on the sessions, but I'm really interested with Ibu Dewi and Mbak Dia presentations earlier, and maybe it is the question is not specifically into what you have been talking, but maybe to Ibu Dewi and also Mbak Dia. So people since years ago misunderstood on what kodrat is, I think. So they sometimes relate it to the division of labor, for example, whether it is different with which one is the kodrat and which one is the division of labor. But what people nowadays is still have in mind that women have to be at the kitchen and that is your kodrat, but that's not kodrat actually. And in the other side, it is we already know that it is sometimes mentioned that once women are independent financially, they will have such a bargaining positions, at least in making some decisions in the household and etc. So related to these questions, to these issues, I actually have a small, when I was in the S1, I got a KKN in the East Java. So there is a village where most of the women is migrant workers. So I asked them several years ago, so they gained so much money and they send money to their home and build some houses, but in fact they still cannot have those bargaining positions while people said that once you are financially independent, so you will have some bargaining positions, at least when you decide where your son will go to the school, and so many other cases that that women have to be included in some discussions. But in fact, whether they give or send so much money to their home, to their house, and they build houses in their hometown, not the husband, but the husband. So mostly they didn't work. So the women, the wives is a women migrant workers, so they send some monies to their husband, but in fact they still face this gender discriminations. I just would like to ask, maybe Ibu Dewi or Mbak Dia can maybe suggest some solutions or thinking about this. Thank you.
Well, please Bu Dewi, you can answer the question, but mungkin lebih dipersingkat karena waktunya sudah hampir habis.
Right. So yeah, there are research that show that among educated couple, increasing income does have an impact on gender division of labor. But I haven't done this, but this is just what I gather from my reading. You know, because of this strong notion of male breadwinner, so male who are not able to fulfill their role for whatever reasons, they get their masculinity hurt, yes? They get their masculinity hurt, and I think Mbak Dia mentioned earlier that that's why they have a different pacar when their wife work abroad. They have a pacar, they get remarried. I think that has something to do with the hurt male ego. So women who are not highly educated, they kind of intuition. They understand their feelings. So. They don't force their voice, they don't exercise their agency precisely because they want to boost the male ego, because the alternative will be divorce. And you know that people who are divorced, they are stigmatized. So it's a lose-lose situation. If they exercise their agency, there is a good likelihood that they will get divorced. But if they want to maintain their marital status, they have to give in a lot. They have to help the husband to feel good about themselves. So I think the husband also understands that the woman is the one who brings the money to the household, but to be able for the men to keep their manhood intact, the wife will not force their opinion to the husband. Thank you, Mbak Meike.
Terima kasih, Bu Dewi. Apakah masih bisa ini satu penanya lagi, mungkin untuk kelompoknya Mas Fawaz ya, karena isunya agak lain sendiri nih tentang ASEAN. Apakah ada? Kalau enggak, saya aja yang bertanya, Mas Fawaz. Mas Fawaz, masih ada? Ya, Mas Fawaz, is there a change so that we can diminish racial discrimination on the grassroots level? Because you present before about the policy, but can we go on the grassroots level in the context of ASEAN?
All right, of course, because the thing that we can do, especially know this is, let's start by the grassroots, from the grassroots level, because if we still waiting for the ASEAN in order to creating or producing some regulation, especially this racial discrimination, in terms of racial discrimination. And also we know ASEAN consists by different kind of cultures, different kinds of religions, different kinds of tribe, and so on and so forth. That really hard in order to make in one perceptions in terms of racial discriminations, and also the non-interventions the ASEAN implemented also become the obstacle. So the first thing, and also that we can hope in the short times, is we try to execute it from the grassroots level, because from the grassroots level, for example, we collaborate with the NGO, collaborate with the government in the low level, it much better for reducing the racial discrimination in the ASEAN. Because also in the every single country, of course, they have a different kind of type in order to handling this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mas Falwa. So it's based on the context of the region, right? So yeah, that's a long process to do that. Thank you very much. So this is the end of our session on women and human rights. I thank you for all presenters and participants who joined with us this noon. And before we close, I guess we can take a picture together. Please turn on your camera. Oh, okay. Mbak Safira will help us to screen capture.
Yeah. I'll count from 1 to 3.
Mbak Safira bisa melihat.
Bentar ya. 1, 2, 3.
Sudah?
Sekali lagi.
Oh ya, sekali lagi.
Oke, sudah. Sekali lagi ya. 1, 2, 3. Oke. Siap, sudah.
Okay. Terima
Thank
kasih,
you.
Mbak Safira.
Terima kasih.
Sampai bertemu di waktu yang akan datang. Mohon maaf
Oke.
untuk segala kesalahan ya.
Terima kasih.
Bermanfaat semuanya. Bye-bye. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Mbak Michael. Terima kasih Mbak Bu Dewi.
Selamat istirahat Mbak Dia.
Iya.
Selamat istirahat Mbak Dia.
Iya.
Mau tidur. Mas Fawas. Mas Andi.
Terima kasih Mas
Mas
Dedi.
Salam kenal.
Salam kenal itu semua.
Thanks Mbak Meg.
Terima kasih Mbak Yogi. Dadah.